our first speaker today is Jill Chen, and Jill is a graduate of the University of Sydney. She works as a research assistant on the BRAINS program, and Jill will be talking with us today about screening for brain tumour caregivers' unmet needs. So over to you, Jill.
Yep. So I'll just get started then. So to begin with, we know that most caregivers of people with brain tumours have high unmet needs, with 80% having at least one unmet need. And we also know that high needs are associated with higher psychological distress, anxiety, and depression, which suggests that to help improve the psychological well-being of caregivers, we could address their unmet needs. So what the BRAINS program wants to do about this is to implement online screening to detect the unmet needs of caregivers. And the idea is that caregivers who are captured by the screening tool as having an unmet need will undergo a more comprehensive assessment and be referred to relevant support services if needed. And we are focused on using a screening tool rather than having people complete entire questionnaires, as the shorter length makes them more ideal for clinical use and also reduces responder burden. But, even though we want to do all of these things with screening, we need screening questions first. So what do we do to get them? We took baseline data from an existing study, the CARES study, which was mentioned earlier, and there's a total of 188 participants. All of them were caregivers of high-grade glioma patients, and as part of the study, they would have had to complete the supportive care needs survey, partners and caregivers version. And as part of this survey, and the survey measures caregiver supportive care needs across the illness trajectory. There's a total of 44 items spread across 4 domains. And given that there's 44 items, the survey can't be used in and of itself as a screening tool. So we had to perform a series of statistical analyses in order to reduce the number of items down to as few as possible. So we began our analyses by looking at each item individually, and that involved determining the structure of the screening tool, the prevalence of each item, so basically how often a caregiver put the item down as a need, and also each item's ability to predict domain scores. And the idea is that the more it's able to predict a domain score, the more it constitutes the makeup of the domain, and thus the questionnaire as a whole. And we took the best performing items from those analyses and formed 2 and 3 item combinations. And for each combination, we looked at, again, the ability to predict domain scores. And we also looked at diagnostic accuracies. So if they were able to distinguish between people who had a need and people who didn't have a need. And based on all of those analyses together, we landed on our final screening questions. And we took those screening questions and performed supplementary analyses where we looked at how many people who completed the original 44-item survey would have been missed by the final screening questions if they indicated they had no need on those final screening questions. So these are our final screening questions. There are 6 items in total, spread across 2 domains, 3 items per domain. And if you can read the questions in a short amount of time, you'll notice that the items in the first domain are more about the caregiver's well-being, while the items in the second domain are more about sort of information and getting information. And as for how many people were missed, only 7.4% of the participants were missed, which is a very small proportion of people. And that suggests that the screening questions that we do have has a really strong clinical potential. And and with that in mind, our next steps will probably be testing out these questions with caregivers and sort of adjusting their wording or anything else if necessary, which we're excited to do. And yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you.